This is a prepaid call from
It's me, Roberto Puto!
an inmate at the county correctional facility. All phone calls are subject to recording and monitoring. To decline this call, press 9 now, and to accept this call, press 1 now. Thank you. Your call has been accepted.
I'm a psychiatric social worker, 21 years out of graduate school. One of my first jobs was as an alcohol and substance abuse counselor in a large community mental health center in the Midwest. Back in 1994, I had one of my first encounters with AA. I made the suggestion that there might be some similarities between alcohol abusers and substance abusers. This was greeted with wholesale disdain among the others. At that time, substance abusers were viewed as the scum of the earth by the AA crowd, while they tended to see themselves when they were alcohol abstinent as model citizens in touch with some kind of secret knowledge that non-alcohol abusers would not and could not ever know. They used this secret knowledge to disqualify anything said by someone who was not a recovering alcoholic. At another time, I started working with a young, very attractive single mother who had recently gotten divorced and had a little daughter. She'd had some problems with alcohol abuse during the time of her stormy divorce and had come to me for support during her transition into single motherhood. She also made the mistake of going to a couple of local AA meetings. While at the meetings, she was told that she was clearly an out-of-control alcoholic and that if she was serious about recovery, she would have to attend 90 meetings in 90 days. As a newly single mother trying to raise a daughter and transitioning back into the workforce, she told them that she would be unable to do that as the babysitting costs would be more than she could afford, and the meetings would take them away from her daughter, who was about 3 years old, and who was also transitioning to life without daddy. Essentially, this woman was told that she wasn't serious about recovery and that she would undoubtedly relapse and get worse and worse. She was told not to think about coming back to another AA meeting until she was ready to get serious about her sobriety and do 90 meetings in 90 days. This woman reacted to all of this with severe discouragement, and about a week after the rejection by the local AA group, indeed started to drink again. About 3 days after she started drinking, she got herself and her daughter into a head-on accident on a local country road. The woman's little girl was fine, but the woman herself went through the windshield face first. I saw her in the ER, and her face was all messed up. Her jaw, as I recall, was broken, as was one cheekbone. She had severe lacerations all over her face and was told she would require extensive plastic surgery to remove all the scarring. And I've always remembered seeing that formerly very attractive woman with her face all bandaged up talking to me about the rejection she faced at the local AA meeting. I was sober in AA for 7 years. I've been drinking on and off for the last 2 years. I went into AA when I reached a desperate time in my life, and it really helped me. For a while. Then I met a man in AA who was a big book thumper. He felt that the answer to my every problem was a verse from the big book. But he was also very charming and loving, and I married him. Almost immediately the problems began. If I was angry that he came home late, it was because I was expecting something. If I wanted him to spend the day with the family instead of fishing with his buddies I was controlling when I went to AA meetings, the others in AA echoed his response. Whatever went wrong in the marriage was the result of my not working the program. I never had a right to get angry. If I was angry, I wasn't working the program. If I thought about the future, I was projecting rather than letting go and letting God. One of his favorites was, "Do you know what your problem is? It's self-centered fear." In a deep depression, I went to a doctor who put me on an antidepressant. Although my husband did not criticize me for this, many in AA did. In their eyes, I was substituting one drug for another. I heard one man say he'd rather put a bullet in his brain than take an antidepressant. I was in so much pain that I wanted to kill myself. However, the medication helped me tremendously. But the problems in the marriage deepened. I thought, well, he's going to meetings, and I'm not, so I must be the problem. After all, he told me so, and so did AA. But every time I went to a meeting, I would hear a lot of self-deprecating talk. I needed to be built up, not torn down. My feelings were never validated. If I felt bad, it was because I wasn't working the program. When I had a problem, I was told to turn it over. During this time, I was also in psychotherapy. I am certainly not averse to looking at changes I need to make within myself. However, I was always told in AA that if I was upset about something, it was my own fault. I had to change my stinking thinking and pray for the person who injured me. Even if they abused me, lied to me, and mistreated me, that other had to forgive. In therapy, I realized that yes, I have to take responsibility for my actions, and that one can choose my response to an adverse event. However, I am not a bad person, I am not a stupid person, and I don't deserve to be treated poorly. And it's okay for me to be angry. Over the past year, I found out that my husband had been indulging in pornography on the internet almost daily. Since he was not interested in sexual relations with me, I thought he was having an affair. I searched his office and found evidence of almost daily use of the internet for porn, and literally dozens of XXX-rated videos and catalogs that he had received at a post office box. Of course, he was still participating in AA at the time and insisted that this was not an addiction. We separated briefly. He begged for forgiveness, got us into marriage counseling, and attended AA meetings nightly. I finally allowed him to move back in. 3 months after he moved back in, I found out that he had been indulging in porn almost since the day he moved back. When I confronted him with the evidence, he broke down and confessed. To make a long story short, he finally left me because I didn't trust him anymore. I felt he needed help, and he didn't. Believe it or not, he is still attending AA meetings nightly. During this painful time, I started drinking again. It alleviated the deep pain I felt over his betrayal of me. I also felt betrayed by AA. All of my husband's AA friends called here daily, speaking the world of him. Because after all, he's not drinking. He lies and participates in another obsessive behavior. But as long as he's not drinking, well, that's okay. Over and over again, when I saw problems before we got married, I was told by my sponsor and others in AA that Don was a good man, that he was a really spiritual man, and that I was lucky to have him, and I was stupid enough to marry him and put myself through years of hell. I feel a lot of bitterness over my separation and the lack of support I got in AA. I am so happy that there are others who have been in AA, particularly women, who feel as I do, and that I've found some of them via the internet. In fact, I have to tell you this. I went to an AA meeting about a year and a half ago. I mentioned to a man that I had attended a women's group the previous evening. He started ranting and raving about how wrong it is to exclude men from AA meetings, that the big book is for both men and women, and that he has a real problem with women-only meetings. After talking to him, I realized why I loved women's meetings so much. Nobody preached to me. AA was designed for men with big egos, not for women with low self-esteem. I hope and pray that I will find a means to sober up that doesn't deflate me further. When I was 23, I left an abusive marriage and started drinking to ease the pain. I kept this up for 10 months. My father is an alcoholic and I didn't want to become one, so I went to an AA meeting. I was wheeled into a meeting because due to a disability, I am in a wheelchair. I asked for a ride home after the meeting since I had cab fare only one way. One of the ladies, although she meant well, sent me home with a known predator 13th stepper, David. I was vulnerable, lonely, and didn't stand a chance from that moment on. Even though at that time I considered myself a lesbian, I was in bed with him before I knew what happened. I suffered several months of what I now consider to be sexual abuse from this man. He also became my sponsor. I know this sounds crazy, but you need to understand the kind of shape I was in. I was barely hanging on to sobriety, and I was totally open to all kinds of beliefs and views. This man was a sober member of AA, and I was a newcomer. Needless to say, I was not thinking straight. People with many years of sobriety are viewed as AA gods. They are rarely questioned, and when it comes time for one of them to speak, they are viewed as so spiritually superior that you might hear a pin drop in some meeting halls. David had enough time sober to be considered superior. Who would question his judgment? Not me. No one told me of this man's history with newcomers. I am not simply complaining. I tried hard in AA, I really did. But I was also in awe of David, and I had only a few friends. My family supported my ex-husband, so I was cut off from them for many years. Also, David saw nothing wrong with sex. He claimed he was removing a roadblock to my sobriety. He said that if I came out as a lesbian in AA, I would be shunned in the God-based AA program.
Thank
But
you. Your
eventually, I
call
did
has been
gain some
accepted.
strength. When I found out David was dating my best friend, I got up the courage to stop having a sexual relationship with him. But then, on the night I received my one-year chip, he raped me. For the record, I don't drink now, but the abuse I suffered almost drove me insane. It has been 10 years since I've gone to a meeting, and I still have horrific nightmares of the sexual abuse. My screaming, "No, no, no, I don't want this." Some AA circles frown on therapy. The day after I had gone to the local battered women's shelter shortly after I was raped, my therapist asked me about my weekend plans. I said I was going to hit a few meetings and kick back. She responded, "Do you want to drink?" I said no. She then wanted to know why I would attend a meeting. I had to explain that in my AA indoctrination, I had never been given a choice. Attending meetings was drilled into me. But that weekend I chose to skip a meeting, and I never went back. I am sober to this day because I found the answers to my pain through therapy, which has done more to relieve me of the need to self-medicate than AA ever did. I really want people to know that AA is often filled with very sick people. I too was sick, but I never preyed on new people. One of the ways AA is similar to cults is the doctrine of 90 meetings in 90 days. I felt that in those 90 days one was torn apart so one might be rebuilt. Really, I was torn apart not just so I could get sober, but so I could be controlled and learn not to think for myself. You know, it is kind of ironic, but had David not raped me the night I got my one-year chip, I might never have sought therapy. I guess I really should be grateful. 2 years ago, when I was 26, I decided I wanted to spend my time differently, drinking less alcohol. I went to an AA meeting because I thought there would be non-drinking activities such as dances. I wanted to meet people who had fun without drinking. My first meeting was fun, everyone seemed so nice. By the third meeting, I figured I must also be an alcoholic since I enjoyed drinking and normal people did not. After hearing stories about the disease and its progression, I became terrified. I immediately threw myself into the program, desperate to find the character defects that made me drink. After 6 months, I was more miserable than I had ever been in my life. Any thought or emotion I had seemed to have some slogan to answer it. The result was this. I showed up at AA happy, energetic, and confident in myself, and ended up a broken down, terrified shell of a person suffering from extreme anxiety attacks, unable to work, in other words, a total mess. Why didn't I get out right away? Because for well over a year, I believed the people in AA when they said I was now dealing with the real things I had been afraid of. Somewhere deep down, I didn't believe that, but I couldn't trust my beliefs because I had a disease that wanted me dead. No wonder I suffered anxiety attacks. How can you live thinking you have living inside you a disease that wants to kill you? It all seemed like a nightmare. It was so hard to believe that I was right and all these other people could be wrong. What really woke me up was when I went back to Maine after 2 years to visit my old friends, something I was advised never to do. I started to tell them what I'd been seeing in the program, that every thought or feeling I expressed was immediately answered by a standard AA reply. Example, I don't want to go to meetings anymore, but they tell me if I don't, I'll drink and then I'll die. But they tell me, that's all I could say, I think, or feel this, but they tell me. When I heard myself talk like this, I realized, oh my God, this sounds just like a cult. My friends were so worried about me that they didn't want me to go back to Delaware. They could not believe the terrible changes in my confidence and self-esteem. I had to go into therapy to recover from this program. And one day I'm very lucky to have my therapist. When she first told me she knew of people who had left AA and were doing well, I was afraid. My program friends promptly told me to get another therapist. It was so hard to believe that I was right and all these other people were wrong. The whole experience has been devastating to me. I also watched my boyfriend go through the same thing. He'd been a young, beautiful person who was full of life and enthusiasm at 3 months sober. Soon he became unemployed and rarely left his bedroom. He finally ended his involvement with AA by getting drunk. I once said I could understand why people relapsed because it was the only way to get out of the program. One day I'm happy to say that we are both feeling much better since we made the decision to leave AA. For me, it was the hardest thing I had to do. I was terrified that I was suffering from the terminal uniqueness I'd been warned about, and that my disease had progressed and would kill me if I left. But I knew I could not spend the rest of my life with the immense fear, guilt, and negativity AA engenders. It breaks my heart to say that. It also breaks my heart that I put myself through 2 years of hell, tearing myself to pieces, looking for my defects. I am reluctant to totally dismiss AA for other people, but it's not for me. I recently heard through the grapevine, no pun intended, that a friend of mine in the program really went down the tubes. After 7 years of sobriety in AA, he went straight to crack cocaine, which he had never done before. They found him down by the railroad tracks, where he had fallen and split his skull open. Currently, he is in ICU in a vegetative state. I knew this man for 2 years. He was quiet, shy, and very lonely. He was not happy during those 7 years of sobriety. But is this his reward for working his program? I understand it was his choice, but I believe it shows that a different approach is needed. This is not an unfamiliar story. In AA, of course, it will be used as further proof of what happens if you don't work your program. When I had been sober in AA for 2 or 3 years, I used to go with friends to the nearby treatment center to visit and sponsor some of the clients in AA. This center, besides taking private paying clients, was also county funded. Folks were sent there to undergo alcohol and addiction treatment in lieu of jail, and homeless folks and the poor were charged nominal fees that could be paid off over time. After a while, I became so disillusioned with the treatment given there that I began to call the center Cold Heart Home. Whenever treatment centers are criticized, AA members will often make the excuse that treatment centers are not AA, and that treatment centers give AA a bad name. I didn't see much difference between AA and Harmony Home. The clients were required to go to AA meetings. They were buzzed to meetings. They were picked up and driven by sponsors to AA and NA meetings. And one of the biggest meetings in town was held right there at Harmony Home every Sunday night. In addition, clients were encouraged and some required to work the first 5 steps of the 12-step program before leaving the center. AA and NA literature was distributed at the center, and if all that wasn't enough, every single counselor who worked at Harmony Home was an AA or NA member. Officially, they are supposed to be anonymous. I knew they were members, however, and so did everyone else because we saw them at meetings all the time. The counselors at the home happened to be among my least favorite AA members. I have never particularly liked most alcohol or drug counselors, although today a couple of my best friends are such counselors. But it seems like the meanest, bossiest, most demanding, angry, and verbally abusive people in AA often gravitate to this kind of career. I realize this statement can be supported only by anecdotal evidence, and 1,000 alcohol drug counselors will probably complain about what is written here, but listen to this roster of the counselors at Cold Heart. Julia, she was the director of the home during part of the time I visited and sponsored women there. Julia's fashion style at AA meetings as a university town AA woman with good recovery was loose, unstyled hair, either tennies or plain leather sandals with pants or shorts, and no makeup on an unsmiling, serious face. During Julia's reign as director of the center, an especially strict rule against sex was enforced. One day, while visiting with my sponsee Daniel at Cold Heart Home, I noticed that she would not talk to men. Later, I found out why. She had been caught by other clients having sex with one of her male visitors. Clients were encouraged to snitch on one another, and Daniel's violation was quickly brought to the attention of Julia. Julia invited everyone else into the office to hear about what Daniel did and to decide what Daniel's punishment should be. The group decided that Daniel would not be allowed to talk to any men visitors or clients or men at meetings for a week. Daniel had been sent into treatment by the court. If she didn't like it, she could leave and go to jail. The no-talk punishment was dealt out for other offenses and could be more severe, with no talk to anyone at all except AA sponsors and counselors. But Daniel's ban was particularly humiliating. Holy scarlet letter, I said to some of my friends. I wondered how these kinds of punishments fit in with any scientific view of alcoholism addiction treatment. But such punishments were accepted at cold heart and still are in the other unmonitored little kingdoms that counselors like Julia reign in. Besides the incidents at the home, Julia showed other evidence of being, if not emotionally
Thank
ill,
you. Your
at
call
least
has
a
been
total
accepted.
jerk. It is quite possible that the 12-step world was the only world in which she was accepted. When I first met her as a newcomer, I had liked what she'd said at the meeting and went up to greet her and introduce myself. She totally snubbed me. She looked at me like I was a small dirt. I get along with almost all people and could only think, and not until much later, that she would not speak to me because I wore a dress and makeup, my hair was long and curled, and I smiled. Some AA women think that smiling and being nice to someone is people-pleasing, a behavior condemned in the recovery subculture. Where I lived, many women in AA rarely smiled, and in the groups I spent most of my time in, wearing makeup and trying to look nice was also suspect. Often you will hear women with time, years sober, boast that as pitiful newcomers barely sober, they took great pains to look great on the outside. Other women will nod understandingly as the speaker adds, but I felt rotten on the inside. In AA, feeling bad means that you do not have good recovery. It is the sign of not having a program or not working it. And at some meetings, maybe because of this kind of socialization, it is popular for women to look unmade up, perhaps even unkempt. It shows that you value your sobriety more than how you look outwardly. Back to Julia. This woman in charge of many newcomers sounded very good at meetings. But she did not like newcomers. I heard her say that in a meeting while I was a newcomer. She was being rigorously honest, according to AA principles, but I was still new enough to think of it as rudeness. I had problems with many people in AA because of this confusion between rigorous honesty or tough love and just plain rudeness. Many of the statements one hears in the AA community which are taken as wisdom are actually nothing but rudeness or even hostility. For example, take the popular AA cliche, keep it simple, stupid. Can any thinking person not find that cliche offensive? AAs repeat that slogan all the time, as well as others like, take the cotton out of your ears and put it in your mouth, and if you point a finger, you've got three pointing back at you. These churlish sayings, which tend to discourage folks from critical thinking, and especially from voicing critical thoughts, are considered wisdom in the step groups. Julia, queen of such churl in meetings and at the home, let it be known that she was an attorney. I soon realized, however, that she had never worked as an attorney while sober. I wondered why not. Being the director of the home, while a position of power in the 12-step community, did not pay well, and the money Julia did make had not been used to pay rent because for a while she had no place to live. She house sat for friends on extended vacations and stored her furniture for free in the garages of other AAs. One woman complained to me that Julia had used her small garage for free storage for 2 years. She asked Julia to come and get the stuff because she needed the space, but Julia acted angry and wouldn't pick up the stuff. I said, Julia's an asshole. Tell her to come and get it or you're putting it on the street. My friend was quite taken aback by my bluntness. It is very rare in 12-step culture to criticize anyone with time. No, that's why so many of the old-timers get away with incredible screwings. But my hypothesis on Julia is mental illness. She lived and acted like a mentally ill or personality disordered person. But the social structure in the 12-step world is such that mental illness is not easily acknowledged. People who are controlling and who avidly seek power over others are often thought of as tough sponsors, which some newcomers are said to need. Grouchy, angry, possibly depressed people are seen as rigorously honest and not people pleasers, particularly if they have time. What I would like to know is why were therapists, courts, and agencies sending vulnerable people in the community to be cared for by Julia? Anyway, enough of Julia. She got so sick of newcomers that she left the home, and along came little Juan. He was well known and liked in local NA and was considered a winner because he had 9 years clean, which was probably a record for NA in our group. The vast majority of people in the NA meetings I attended didn't stay clean for even a year. Also, little Juan dressed and talked like a biker, with the keychain hanging heavily from the jeans, the black jackets, the jackboots. This look is popular in NA, but I had never seen him on a motorcycle. In fact, no one knew what little Juan did for a living. He didn't seem to have a job until he became a counselor at the home. One day I arrived at Cold Heart to work with a sponsee. However, the whole house and all the clients were in an uproar. The Cold Heart Home Board and county authorities were coming to inspect the house. Funds had been earmarked for painting and other small renovations which were not yet finished. All the clients were running about, sawing, painting, hammering, cleaning. They were being utilized to do most of the work. No professionals were being used at all. I don't understand this, I said to Margarita, my sponsee. Daniel had long since run away. Aren't you supposed to be concentrating on recovery? Margarita assured me that participating in improvements to the house was part of recovery. I asked her if she could take a break to go through the big book points we had discussed in our visit the week before. Margarita went into the noisy, dust-filled din and came back with her big book and notes. We sat outside on folding chairs beneath a big oak tree and sessioned for about 30 minutes until Juan came huffing and barreling out, his keychain rattling. He was quite overweight and had to belt his jeans under his enormous belly. Keeping his shirts tucked in was impossible, so a bit of butt cleavage always showed. "Hey, Mexican," he called to Margarita, motioning toward the house with his thumb. "Ya need it in there." Margarita said goodbye, got up, and ran in. She was a grown woman, but I was reminded of my teenage years, trying to get a few minutes of communication with a girlfriend who was grounded, caught by her angry dad. For the next 2 or 3 weeks, most of the home clients' extra time was taken up with house renovations. During that time, little Juan mainly sat on his office throne, talking on the phone, settling differences between clients, and grazing from a bag of cookies or chips. He did not like to get up, and he did not like to answer questions from outsiders. Once I went to his office to inquire about whether Daniel would be back. "She's not here," said Juan, looking up from an enormous sandwich a client had brought him from the home kitchen. "I know that, but she's been gone for a while, and I'm wondering when she'll be back. She did not tell me she was going home or out for any time at all. Sometimes clients could leave for family emergencies." "She's not here," repeated Juan. "Can you tell me when she'll be back?" I specifically asked. "No," he said, his mouth and jowls roiling over a big bite of sandwich. Later, I heard that Juan had been kicked out as treasurer of the local NA group for stealing the group treasury. I and others were shocked. Usually those who steal from the treasury are newcomers. I could not understand why Juan, who at least had a job, would steal from the NA treasury unless he had started using again and needed the money for drugs. But he was still collecting chips and was at least officially clean. I knew he was into porno video because he used to borrow frequently from a collection an NA acquaintance had accumulated to entertain cranksters in past drug-dealing days. But even if he'd had to rent videos, surely they were inexpensive enough to preclude stealing from the NA treasury. One can only guess why he did it. What I would like to know is, do professionals who send vulnerable clients to NA and to treatment centers such as Cold Heart Home understand that the only criteria for being a 12-step role model or winner is not necessarily health, nor even a semblance of it, but instead time? Little Juan is but a mild example of this strange phenomenon, this worshipful view that once addicted teetotalers possess special wisdom, which qualifies them to hold positions of power and to guide others. Yet another such counselor in Cold Heart Home was Gloria. If she worked at any other job except perhaps as a prison guard, Gloria would have been fired. She was probably the most consistently unpleasant, disagreeable person I had met within the prior 5 years. She barked at people, started arguments, yelled at clients, slammed cupboards, frowned, sighed, moaned, and dripped sarcasm. She may have been deeply depressed and in desperate need of medication. I wonder if any board members realized how this employee acted at work. They may not have unless someone made a complaint, which was unlikely. In the recovery subculture, to criticize anyone means either that you are angry and therefore not in possession of good recovery, or you have 3 fingers pointing back at you. In other words, noticing and complaining about Gloria's ugly personality, being unsuitable in a treatment environment would mean that something terrible is really wrong with you. two things that made Gloria dangerous are that she sounded good at AA meetings and also possessed at least 7 years of time. So clearly, in AA, she was a winner. Because of these things, unsuspecting newcomers often got involved with her. If I thought a decent percentage of people who stayed at the home stayed clean or sober, I might not be so critical. Again, this is just anecdotal evidence, but in the 2 years I made frequent visits to Cold Heart, I recall only one woman who actually stayed sober a while, continued attending meetings, and got a job and a place to live after
Thank
leaving
you.
the home.
Your call has been
Out of
accepted.
an entire AA group of 200 in town, there were only 2 old-timers who said they had graduated from Cold Heart Home. Anyway, this roster of Cold Heart Home employees is not comprehensive because there's no purpose to that. If you would like to gather your own evidence on the pervasiveness of AA and NA members in treatment facilities, call your local county or city-funded detox treatment center or even general mental health center. Say that you would like to recommend the center to a relative, but first you want to find out how many of the counselors are proficient in 12-step treatment and are NA or AA members themselves. If the person who answers the phone can't tell you, they probably will be able to tell you who can.